Trump accounts just hit this past weekend, but is this a generous government gift or a corporate bailout?
They'll have hundreds of thousands of dollars. Think of that.
This is another great example of it's for the children. We're going to get age verification for everybody.
Too many people that are still oblivious that this stuff can even possibly happen. This is no longer a headline. It's no longer a maybe. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's your everyday reality.
The highly anticipated introduction of Trump accounts just hit this past weekend. Eligible children receive a one-time $1,000 federal contribution into an account that is, by default, invested into a low-cost S&P 500 fund with top holdings that include companies like NVIDIA, Apple, and other big tech companies. But is this a generous government gift, a vote-grabbing scam, or a corporate bailout? Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Bitcoin Banter. I have Tony and Katie here with me, but before we dive in, be sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around to the end for our donkey of the week. Guys, let's start with this clip from President Trump.
For a free investment savings account. And again, a lot of people are people that are uninvolved in terms of they don't have the children, but or their children are older, but they're putting millions and millions of dollars into the accounts of poor children. Financially poor children, and the parents can't even believe what's happening. So it's an amazing thing.
Alrighty, Katie, I'm going to let you maybe set the stage for us. Talk a little bit about Trump accounts, what this means, and what you think of this whole debacle.
So first, I think the funniest part of that clip is the nodding sycophants in the background. Whenever something is framed as for the children, and we've been seeing a lot of this lately, this is where we have to look a bit closer and, what is behind the rhetoric. And in this case, I think it's a case of follow the money. So who is actually going to benefit from these new Trump accounts? So with these Trump accounts, the federal government will contribute $1,000 for every eligible baby born, I believe, over the next 5 years or so. And then parents can contribute up to $5,000 a year until the child turns 18. And at that point, this account, I believe, becomes an IRA account, so a retirement account. This whole thing is framed as retirement accounts for children. So where does this money come from and who does it go to? Well, it comes from the $1,000 per child comes from the Treasury. And we know the federal government is already has massive amounts of debt. So this money is coming from debt. So essentially they're printing $1,000 per child and they're pumping it into the stock market via an ETF. So by default, it is a State Street managed ETF that this money goes into. So State Street gets the fees. The stock market gets $1,000 per child minimum, because then if the parents are also contributing, they're getting all the money that the parents are contributing as well. So it's not like the parents get to choose where this money is going. It's going somewhere very specific. If you step back a bit and you say, why does a newborn baby even need a retirement account? Why do they need to own stocks at 1 month old? It doesn't make any sense. It only makes sense if you consider the fact that the pension system in the US is going bust. I mean, they're not going to be able to pay the pensions in the future. So in my view, Trump is able to kill multiple birds with one stone with these so-called Trump accounts. So he can buy some votes. Wall Street gets all the newly minted money plus whatever parents decide they want to contribute, if anything. The banks get fees. So the managers of the ETF funds get fees, and Social Security gets a bit of a reprieve, perhaps. It's essentially almost like a mini bailout for Wall Street as well, because this money is going to end up in the stock market. Call me cynical, but the fact that the parents don't actually get to choose where this money is going. For example, you cannot buy $1,000 worth of Bitcoin and put it in self-custody for your child. That's not on the menu. If it was, it would be wrapped up in something like IBIT. So what I recommend parents should do in this case is go and buy your child $1,000 worth of Bitcoin, and put it into self custody rather than setting up one of these garbage accounts for your child at birth.
Yes, I completely agree with that. A lot of socialist rhetoric in this one little clip. And the other thing I'd add is you're right. He's killing a lot of political birds with one stone. The one bird he's not going to be able to kill with this stone, however, is inflation, which I think we're going to see more of, and probably bigger stock market bubbles as well if people opt into this. Tony, take it away.
Man, it's remarkable how you can just stand there and say this with a straight face to so many people on live TV. If you believe any of this stuff, man, I don't know where you've been living for the last the last decade or so. There's no such thing as free money. All of this marketing hype using the kids as the most popular narrative is just a front for BS. Do not engage in this. The legacy system has never had any good intentions towards you or your kids. If you want to make a good use of that $1,000, like Katie said, put it in a money that's actually real money that is outside the manipulative control of these folks. No one's going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars by the time they're 18. Like, you have to be insane to believe that, to believe this joke. And even if they did, what do you think the value of the dollar is going to be by then? If you're talking about hyperinflated dollars, yeah, sure. A lot of people will become billionaires, by that definition. But that's definitely not the worthless paper you want to be holding. So again, this is nothing more than, the same old corrupt, legacy games, being marketed under the protection of your kids. Like, for God's sake, stop falling for it and opt out into a system that finally exists for the world, and that's Bitcoin in full self custody.
Absolutely. And by the way, none of this is financial advice. Click the link below. You could schedule a free call with our team to learn about how we can help you take proper self custody. That is going to be the best investment you can make, not only in yourself, but in the future of your children. Bitcoin is only generational wealth if you can hold it and you can do it properly, counterparty risk free. Guys, our next story here, crazy stuff. We're going to watch another clip here and then talk a bit about what's happening in the UK.
The government is preparing to force you to consume BBC and establishment media content to the top of your social media feeds by law. Yes, you could be force-fed what I would call government propaganda and state-controlled media by default, and they're trying to do it by controlling and forcing social media companies to manipulate their algorithms.
Okay, so the UK wants to take control of the YouTube and other social media algorithms, to his point, basically pushing government propaganda, right? That any government sanctioned or government blessed media gets preferential treatment. Tony, I don't think this is surprising at all, probably to any of us. This is the desperate move of a dying system. What's your thought on all of this?
Absolutely, man. How do you know that a government is dying and decaying and it's on its last legs? It's when they start behaving, with such extremes. These are all results of fear. They are desperately trying to remain in power, by hook or by crook, and they are using, all forms of coercion in order to do this. If big tech plays along, then a lot of people are going to be subjected to this garbage because the one thing that they fear is for their citizens to learn the truth. This is why they're clamping down on every single outlet in order to keep folks ignorant and hypnotized with whatever nonsense they want to spew out at them. The silver lining to all of this is that historically it's never worked, at least in the long run. This gives rise to platforms, to solutions, to products, software that no government or institution can manipulate or control. So it might be like a short wave of pain, but down the line, man, the solutions to obsolete all of these attempts becomes the norm. If you're a UK citizen, make your voice heard. Call whoever you have to do, and make it loud and clear that you object to all of this. If platforms like YouTube comply to this, stop using YouTube. The only way to enforce change is by defunding the incentives. When YouTube starts losing real revenue, believe me, they will no longer comply blindly to any request. But the power has always been within the people. But most of the people don't do anything, unfortunately. Hopefully this time will be different.
Yeah, time will tell. It's scary stuff though to imagine that when you search Bitcoin in YouTube, the first thing you're going to get is the BBC talking about how it's killing, animals in the ocean, or it's going to be the end of civilization. Katie, what do you think about all this?
Okay, so thinking about where most of us get our news from nowadays. So when I was a kid, it was the 6 p.m. state funded broadcasters. Today, it's completely different. I mean, due to the advent of the internet and also social media, it's been significantly decentralized. So we have a whole world of options as to where we can get our information from. We do not have to rely on state funded broadcasters. So now legacy media, they've lost views, they've lost ad revenue, they've lost relevancy, and they've lost the ability to control the narrative. And they're panicking. And this sort of ham fisted attempt to force a private company to change their algorithm to promote the state funded broadcasters and their particular flavor of propaganda, this is the result. So this is a kind of a sort of a form of soft censorship, if you like. Well, that's the way that I see it, because they will deprioritize independent creators in order to prioritize state-funded broadcasters. That's just the inevitable, like that is the outcome of what is going to happen. So anything, in my view, anything that is potentially critical of the government or anything that they don't want you being exposed to is what is going to be deprioritized in order to prioritize the likes of the BBC. Anything that the government doesn't like, they've labeled it misinformation or disinformation or whatever their favorite catchword is, that they don't want you to be exposed to, that is going to be pushed down in the algorithm's priority. And, we will then be expected to fill that gap with what they want us to see. But I don't think it's going to work.
It's not going to work because I mean, what they're really trying to do here is force people into a cage that belongs to some sort of sick lab. They don't want you to see anything. They don't want you to hear anything. They don't want you to think. They just want you to obey and to comply to whatever they want. And the way they're trying to do this is by eliminating all variables, out there in the world that can shape your thought process, your words, your whatever it is. And so they want to take away your money. They want to take away your speech. They want to take away your whatever it is that comes to their sick minds. They want to take it away from because you exist to serve these crazy parasites. And so if you don't do anything or make your voice heard, that's exactly what's going to happen. And don't think for a second this is isolated to the UK. There are many other countries around the world that are slowly starting to adopt the same measures. And if the people don't resist, the people don't seek out other alternatives, the end is very dire. Bitcoiners have understood this a long time ago, but there's too many people that are still oblivious that this stuff can even possibly happen. This is no longer a headline. It's no longer a maybe. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. It's your everyday reality. So open your eyes, wake up, and do something.
Yes, 1984 has arrived in real life. Hey, real quick for everyone listening still, we would appreciate you smashing the like button. And by the way, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Next week, we have a podcast episode coming out, a special edition podcast. We're going to dive deep with a couple members of our team, very technical members of our team, into BIP 110. We're getting tons of questions about that. They walk through it cordially. They come to different conclusions about the solution. So they're actually very kind to each other and bounce ideas off of each other throughout. So make sure you're subscribed. You are not going to want to miss that. Alrighty, guys, up next, speaking of government overreach, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the KIDS Act. If it passes in the Senate, it will be the end of the open internet. This is Callie, by the way. Platforms will be forced to implement age verification. You will have to upload your government ID to post on social media. And then he provides his commentary. The goal is to fully track every internet user and to implement global KYC regulation for free speech. Tony, I would like you to rant on this first.
Every time you start hearing something about kids, run. Know that it's absolutely bad news and nothing for your good at all. This is an attempt for global censorship. There's no other way to sugarcoat this. They want to control what you see, what you hear, and like I said earlier, your ability to think and reason. This should be fought by every living soul who still values, their God-given right to privacy. There's nothing about this that's for the protection of your kids. All of this is to force us into a cage where we have no exits. And so we have to opt out from every platform, every software, every big tech company that blindly complies with this. There are many other options. Yes, I get it's annoying to change habits that we've been accustomed to for a very long time, but if you value your freedom, your privacy, your life in general, and you don't want to be subjected to a life of a slave, really, of a digital donkey, you have got to pay attention and opt out. One, you cannot give them control of your money. That is your elixir of life. If you don't own your money, you're done. There's doesn't really matter what you do afterwards if your money is in the controls of someone who can turn it off on moment's notice. And two, your speech, your thoughts are your God-given rights as a human being. It's not up to someone to decide what you can think and what you can say. You have these rights because you exist. It's not because your government blessed you with that possibility. That message needs to be sent back in a very strong way, and there should be measures put into place where the mere thought of this should never be allowed to materialize again. All these decentralized solutions that we're starting to see, pop up more and more, this is in direct response to these stupid attempts to try to enslave humanity, which again, I do not think it's going to work because most of us will never accept it. Whatever it takes, it'll never go down.
Yes. Katie, what's your take on the Kids Act?
Well, this is another great example of the whole "it's for the children" proposals or legislations that we're having shoved at us right now. And it's interesting too because we know that there are a whole bunch of countries that are all doing this more or less at the same time. And we've got Europe, we've got Australia, now we've got the US, who are all making noises about we've got to protect the children from social media, we've got to protect the children from big tech, and this is how we are going to do it. We're going to get age verification for everybody. Now, in this particular act, there isn't actually anything that specifies that these platforms require you to upload ID. However, these big tech platforms, they will always err on the side of caution because if they don't, they can get sued. So chances are that despite the idea that they're going to somehow be able to do this without asking for your ID, they're not going to be able to, and they will end up asking for your ID. I mean, I've already seen this starting to happen on X. So there are certain posts on X that I can no longer see anymore. I'm in Europe because I'm not allowed to see them unless I upload my ID, which I absolutely am not going to do. So, I mean, personally, I refuse to KYC myself on any social media platform. No matter where you are, either it's arrived already or it's on the way. Get yourself a good VPN that protects your privacy and don't give in to their ridiculous demands.
Well said. And by the way, that's something we can help you with: open source VPNs, personal cybersecurity, online privacy. You can click the link below to learn more about that as well. Schedule a call with our team. Guys, we've got more. Strike is introducing a volatility proof loan. So they say you can borrow against your Bitcoin and the price no longer has a say in what happens to your collateral, no margin calls, no price liquidations. Bitcoin falls 80%, your stack stays yours, and we'll play a quick clip from this. Okay, so here's the caveat here is that while you may be protected from price volatility of Bitcoin, you're not going to get margin called because of a dip like the one we've seen very recently. The problem for me is I'm just going to set this up, and then I'd love your input. But the challenge is that okay, you've overcome one big hurdle when it comes to the risk of Bitcoin backed loans, which we advise against. Again, not financial advice, but we always discourage our clients from ever touching Bitcoin backed loans. All of the other risks remain intact. The 6102 attack, we've got custodial risk, data breaches, KYC, not your keys, not your coin. All of that stuff still exists. So yes, okay, you've overcome one big hurdle, but until you get to hold on to your keys, until it's no longer a fiat tied product, which obviously a Bitcoin backed loan could never be, I'm either completely disinterested or I'm going to continue to discourage people from ever touching a product like this. Katie, why don't you talk a little bit about the nature of the product? And then Tony, obviously, want your input here as well.
Sure. So I think what Strike is trying to do here is they're addressing what is probably the most common criticism of BTC-backed loans, which is you are borrowing against an extremely volatile asset. Now, volatile in terms of the dollar price. We're always going to see these big moves down, and when they happen, people either get margin called or they outright get liquidated and they lose their Bitcoin collateral. I mean, this has happened so many times to so many people. So I think this product, they're trying to address that particular criticism of Bitcoin-backed loans. However, when you see something that sounds a little bit too good to be true, look closely at the fine print because it probably is. So I had a look at the interest rates on these Strike loans, and they are several points higher than a standard Bitcoin-backed loan, which is already high. Like most of the big lenders, I believe, are lending out at somewhere around 9 to 11%. And these particular loans, you are paying for that protection, if you like, against volatility by paying a higher interest rate. And the interest rate goes up to something like 14%. I mean, to me, that's completely ridiculous. So these are pretty short-term loans. I believe they need to be paid off within about 6 months. As long as you keep up the payments on the loan, no matter how low the Bitcoin dollar price goes, you don't get liquidated. But you must maintain the payments. And if you don't maintain those payments, you do have a grace period, I believe, of 10 days or so, in which you have to get that money together to pay back whatever you owe. And if you don't, your collateral's gone. So it doesn't mean your collateral's completely protected. And as you were saying, Michael, there's other layers of risk here when you borrow against your Bitcoin, because you have so many layers of counterparty risk happening. The Bitcoin's no longer in your custody. So in my books, it's no longer your Bitcoin. So, that there's still heaps of risk involved. And at the end of the day, I don't think people should borrow against your Bitcoin. I've been quite vocal about this because it's just as likely to work against you than to work in your favor. And if you absolutely must take out a loan, I think there are better options. There's safer options with lower interest rates out there if you must.
Yes, I agree with all of that. Tony, he's shaking his head already. What do you think?
Guys, Bitcoin is money. You don't need this garbage. What they're trying to do here is trying to fine tune a world that's going to keep you dependent on a dying and decaying system. You still have to pay back the loan. It's not free money. When they engineer a flash crash, for those who are going to, probably comment in the comments, oh no, that's never going to happen. Sure, keep telling yourself that story. You don't know what's going to happen. All of these things, all of these products extend the lifeline of the very thing Bitcoin was created to obsolete. Everybody's talking about Bitcoin separation of money and state, but yet all of these services keep the state relevant with that money. Pick what you want. Do you want freedom money, or do you want convenience, thinking you're going to get the freedom money at the same time? That's not how it works. There's no good news in a dying legacy system. You are taking on counterparty risk that you can't control. You are giving up the most valuable asset humanity has ever known, and you're giving it to someone else in return for worthless paper. Why would you do that? In addition to this, all of these loans require you to have backup collateral, more Bitcoin than the initial amount that you put up front. In case the US dollar price, for example, dips, well, they're going to ask you to back it up, to fill up so that your LTV is at a healthy level again. If you don't have that extra Bitcoin, what do you think is going to happen? Because by then, for sure, you won't be able to pay back your loan. Then ultimately, you're still going to lose everything. It's very simple. If you can't afford something, guys, you don't buy it. You wait until you can, and then you do it headache free. In a Bitcoin world, you find ways to earn more Bitcoin. It's money. It's not an investment. It's not that pristine collateral that you're going to use to accumulate more worthless toilet paper. That's not what it is. That's what they want you to believe it is, but that's not what it is. That's how you lose your Bitcoin. So stay away from this nonsense and focus on the simplest rule in Bitcoin. You find ways to earn it, you save in it, you spend it, you think of it as money. Done.
Well said. And just to draw the distinction, so when Tony's talking about defending your LTV, that's on the traditional Bitcoin backed loan. The volatility proof Bitcoin backed loan doesn't have that risk. It has all of the other risks. Either way, philosophically, I think what we can all agree on here is that you're feeding a legacy system that we want nothing to be a part of. And that is why, not financial advice, we recommend you avoid these things. Guys, we got two more stories. We're almost to the donkey of the week. Make sure you stick around. Also, make sure you smash that like button. Be sure you subscribe to the channel so you can catch all of our banters, but also our BIP 110 special edition podcast episode next week. Okay, guys, we've got Isabella. By the way, I love Isabella. I know Isabella. Take a bit of a disagreement here with her. The Bitcoin culture is dead, she says, and nobody wants to admit it. I'm not going to play a 12-minute video for all of us now. Well, here's what I will say in her defense. When I came into Bitcoin in 2022, we were in the depths of a bear market. And I remember thinking Bitcoiners were hilarious and funny. The memes were great. We were arguing over cast iron versus stainless steel cookware. Like that was the culture of Bitcoin in 2022. Right now, everyone's just yelling at each other, mainly about Knott's Core, BIP 110, all of those things. And so it does feel like we've kind of lost that spark at the moment. However, going to Prague and actually being face to face with real Bitcoiners, I feel the exact opposite. I don't think Bitcoin culture is anywhere near dead. In fact, I think it's thriving. But Tony, what would your response to Issa be?
Man, I was very surprised to read that from her because I met her briefly once and she seems extremely nice. It's very social, very social, very bubbly, very outgoing. And of course, a big fan of Bitcoin. But you know how the saying goes, show me your friends and I'll tell you who you are. I just think she's been hanging around the wrong crowd. If you honestly think Bitcoin culture is dead, you're definitely in the wrong place because those that are focusing on Bitcoin the right way are booming. I mean, just go to the most recent example of Bitcoin Prague. The energy there was off the charts, electric. No one or very few people were talking about TradFi and Bitcoin. They were talking about Bitcoin as, sovereign money. How do I hold it? How do I, build my life around it? Where do I move in order, to put, the negativity and the harsh rules and compliance bullshit from my government in my rearview mirror. That's what the conversations were about. So I'm not really sure what culture that's dead that she's referring to. So I just think, Isa, if you're listening to this, give us a call, man. We'll introduce you to the right crowd, and I'm pretty sure within 5 minutes, you'll be hard pressed to change your statement.
Katie, what do you think? Is Bitcoin culture dead?
So I think there's a couple of things going on here. I'm looking at this through the lens of a social media creator. And there's always that tension between getting the views, getting the clicks, and the freedom to make something that you actually want to make or you actually believe is true. And once you get to the stage where your revenue or your income depends on views, you do tend to lean towards things that are a bit more, controversial, or they'll get the clicks. So, in this case, it might mean a little bit of clickbait. That's not a criticism of this particular creator. You know, that's exactly how the game is played. It's no coincidence that she made this when the Bitcoin price is very low, even though she says in the video, you know, that's got nothing to do with Bitcoin or anything like that. You don't make videos like this when Bitcoin is hitting all-time highs. I guess she's saying Bitcoin culture is dying, but she's kind of framing Bitcoin culture as what happens on social media. And she specifically references X in her video. Now, for me, I don't like a lot of the social media around Bitcoin. I don't like X specifically. And I think we have to remember that there can be very significant changes to social media algorithms. So perhaps 4 years ago, the algorithm was giving us more positive things about Bitcoin. And perhaps now it's favoring things that are a lot more, you know, people shouting each other, if you like, on social media, people criticizing each other, people calling each other out. Perhaps that is being pushed to the forefront, and it kind of gives this impression, if Bitcoin to you, a big part of Bitcoin to you is social media, then you're going to get the impression that perhaps that the culture that you used to know from 4 or 5 years ago is dead or dying. You know, for me, it's still all noise. It doesn't matter to me what's happening on X or social media, or who happens to be the hero of Bitcoin right now, which is something she touches on in the video as well, or what the price is or anything like that. I mean, Bitcoin is Bitcoin, with or without the financial wrappers, with or without the social media noise, or with or without the heroes and villains. So, you know, and I also think that what she is trying to say here, it's a little bit difficult to take her seriously as well, because during the video, you know, she is paid to promote the very things that she says is killing Bitcoin culture. So that kind of stood out for me.
All righty. So our opinion, I think unanimously, is that Bitcoin culture is not dead. It's not dying, and there are a lot of builders creating some amazing things in the space. And I can tell you, talking with our clients, it's incredibly positive. People are excited, and it's only gonna remember it's going up forever, Laura. Alrighty, guys. So we've got our donkey of the week. This is hilarious. One of the best I think we've had. The Reserve Bank of Australia. The staff has rejected a proposed 9.5% pay raise, sending Governor Michelle Bullock back to the bargaining table as she urges wage restraint across the economy and grapples with mounting cost pressures at the central bank. The reason for this pushback from the central bank staff is because it doesn't keep pace with inflation. The irony is beautiful. I'm going to let Katie take this one first. Why don't you weigh in? I think you've got your finger on the pulse of the culture and news in Australia probably better than Tony and I do. And then Tony, obviously, I want you to have a good laugh at this.
Governor Michelle Bullock, she has overseen 3 rate cuts last year, which was election year. Keep that in mind. And since the election, those 3 rate cuts have now been reinstated in the form of rate hikes. Also keep in mind that the governor, Michelle Bullock, and the board of the Reserve Bank are essentially appointed by the treasurer. And the treasurer's role is ministerial. That is to say, the treasurer is a member of the incumbent Labour Party. So excuse me for being cynical here. So also, just for a bit of context, when I left Australia in 2007, the official interest rate was 6.5%. And by 2022, and we all know what was happening then, it was cut to 0.1%. I mean, it's never, ever been anywhere near that low before. And what happened? It fueled inflation like crazy. So, you know, this rampant inflation has caused living costs has kind of spiral out of control for your average person in Australia. And this, of course, includes the Reserve Bank staff. You know, they are not immune to this. And, you know, by all measures, these people have really good professional jobs if they're working for the Reserve Bank. And they're saying, hey guys, 9.5% pay increase, this is not enough for us to live on. And meanwhile, the governor, Michelle Bullock, received a $400,000 pay raise in 2024, the year before the election, and she is now paid more than the Prime Minister of Australia and more than the US Fed chairman. So she's not hurting at all. And so I think that the board of the Reserve Bank and the governor, they just look like a complete bunch of donkeys, because now they have to deal with this massive headache that they caused in the first place. And on top of that, their own governor got a 33 or 40% pay raise, and they're quibbling over 9.5% for their own staff.
Yeah. Basically, what the way I read this is that the central bank staff had to leave La La Land, go into the real world, and buy groceries, and they realized it didn't really, the math didn't math. Tony, peak clown world, my friend. What do you think?
Man, this is like, it's really amusing to watch this from the sidelines. I mean, what did you expect? If you don't belong to that, special club of thieves, well, of course, your life is not going to be as comfortable as theirs, because their DNA is theft, and yours is actually providing honest work from morning to night. The people aren't taking it. It's very simple. They're broke. They can't afford anything. And everywhere they go, the sticker price is way higher than what they're comfortable with. So 9.5 is like a slap in the face. It's almost insulting. The conversation shouldn't even begin without like a minimum of 20% on the table. And even that, I'm sure can be pushed to cover all sorts of other areas where people are struggling. So, sooner or later, man, like the BS ends, because it's very simple. When people go hungry, they stop listening just blindly to whatever it is that you're throwing at them. And that becomes a problem, because again, the system that's been used to, easy extraction without any competition is dying. Like they don't know what to do. And so all of these jokes that we keep reading about, are a sign of this desperation, futile desperation, because clearly they're not very intelligent people, because they've had, again, no resistance prior to now. And so good for the people for pushing back. And I'm expecting to see, these types of stories escalate, because it's not going to stop just here. And you're going to start hearing about this in every part of society, because the common denominator is identical. You walk out into the real world, prices are beyond your reach, and you're going to look for answers, by hook or by crook. So brace yourself.
Well said, and I think a great place to wrap up. For everyone who tuned in, we appreciate you being here. Make sure you click the link below. You can schedule a time with our team to learn more about our online privacy services, self custody, how we can walk you through that step by step. Also, we've got a link to our newsletter. Make sure you subscribe. That is such a fantastic resource. I think way underrated. It comes out every Sunday, and we dive deep into a number of topics and issues and things within the industry. And of course, make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. We've got our BIP 110 episode coming out next week that you're not going to want to miss. If you've got questions, I think they're all going to be answered there. Katie, Tony, thank you so much for the time today. Great chatting as always. We'll be
Thanks,
back next
guys.
week.
Thanks, guys.